100 weeks. Yeah, I know. Time flies, you know? Yeah, no, the first one was 225. You think this will beat that? Nah, come on. Not a chance. All right. July 25th, 1941. Japan has been fighting in China for 4 years now, and it has been not only a real strain on the Japanese economy, they are also experiencing severe shortages of raw materials. Well, this week they upped the stakes. This week they turned their attention to the south. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Allied invasion of Syria ended with an Allied victory. As for the Axis invasion of the Soviet Union, the Germans were stopped in the north, but Army Group Center completed most of a pocket based around Smolensk with hundreds of thousands of Red Army soldiers inside. German High Command was having issues, though, deciding where to attack next, and Japan got a new foreign minister. Japanese politics is more and more having to deal with the issue of not being able to finish the war in China. Military spending was up to 70% of the budget already 3 years ago, and by now, the idea of any sort of backing down is extremely remote. Japan has rejected the idea of joining Germany in attacking the Soviets. The thing is, since they haven't made much headway in China, they want to turn their attention to Southeast Asia for things like oil and rubber that they need for their war effort. On the 19th, they give Vichy France an ultimatum demanding bases in French Indochina. The French say, okay. By the end of the week, 125,000 Japanese troops move into Indochina. The Japanese will begin occupying the bases next week on the 28th. What this illustrates, though, can only be a shift from focusing on war with China to war with the Western powers, Britain, the Netherlands, and the US, to get what they need. See, occupying northern Indochina makes sense against China because you can blockade China better from there. But occupying southern Indochina points in exactly the opposite direction, moves against the British and Dutch to the south, and the Americans in the Philippines and the edges of the Pacific. It's not exactly subtle, but their war isn't going by the book. Neither is the Germans' war. Well, according to Abwehr Chief Wilhelm Canaris, who says the 20th that the mood at Rastenburg, Adolf Hitler's current headquarters, is jittery, since it's more and more obvious that the campaign is not going as expected. He adds that the signs are telling that this war will not bring about the expected internal collapse so much as the invigoration of Bolshevism. Hitler is as worried as his commanders by now about the Soviet ability to withdraw and reform. So Führer Directive 33 comes out the 19th and says, the aim of the next operations must be to prevent any further sizable enemy forces from withdrawing into the depths of Russia and wiping them out. This specifies that Hermann Hoth's and Heinz Guderian's panzer groups in Army Group Center are to be diverted from driving on Moscow and will instead head north and south respectively to help with advances on Leningrad and Kiev. Hitler is also worried about the huge amount of partisan activity already happening behind the German lines. On the 23rd, he issues a supplement to Directive 33 to the commanders of those areas, to be held responsible together with the troops at their disposal for quiet conditions in their areas. They are not to request reinforcements, but to instead use draconian measures. Also under this supplement, it makes clear there are to be no panzers at all driving on Moscow, just infantry. After mopping up operations on Smolensk and on the southern flank, Army Group Center, whose infantry formations drawn from both its armies are strong enough for the purpose, will defeat such enemy forces as remain between Smolensk and Moscow. It will then capture Moscow. But there is the issue of actually getting the infantry to Moscow, and the horse situation is growing dire. The armies of Army Group Center are those infantry that have been plodding along, backing up Hoth's and Guderian's panzer spearheads. And they rely almost totally on horses for moving supplies and equipment. They have 217,000 horses, and until German engineers can switch Soviet train gauges to European standard, and they can use the railways, the horses' shoulders are bearing the burdens. General Gotthard Heinrici wrote to his wife a couple weeks ago, "Now we are a long way back, marching 30 to 35 kilometers every day. The horses hardly make it along the sand, but we must go on." But already, even after the first week of the campaign, German Army Chief of Staff Franz Halder wrote June 29th, "Horses very fatigued." Captured horses are already replacing the German horses that began the campaign only a month ago. The German army's horses were principally made up of stout breeds raised in the temperate climates of Central Europe and unaccustomed to the searing conditions and dreadful roads of the East. The long hours of work took their toll, and the heavy losses created new dilemmas for the army. But guess what? Transporting new horses to the units means marching them all the way to the advancing front, so they often arrive as exhausted as those they are to replace. But it's not just the roads and the marching that are problems. There's food. The Germans want to feed their horses oats, but they are not so readily available in the Soviet Union. As the army advanced eastward, provisions for the horses could not keep up. So in many cases, the horses are now eating straw from the roofs of peasants' houses, which is not a replacement for their regular diet. Horses are also being lost in combat to partisans or to the Soviet planes that can easily attack long, drawn-out columns of horses and men. And I've said before that the distance between the mobile panzers and the marching infantry is a growing problem. But it's also a weird one. Wilhelm Prüller, a non-commissioned infantry officer, wrote in his diary at the beginning of July, "The whole war takes place, more or less, on the road. Without securing the land lying to the right and left of the road, we move along and reach the appointed goals. How many Russians must be cruising the country still? How many enemy tanks are off the road, hidden in protected positions, waiting for the right opportunity to rush up behind the troops and raise hell?" Funny the way this war is being waged. And the panzers are having loads of operational problems of their own. On the 22nd, the 18th Panzer Division gets 30 new Mark III and Mark IV models. This brings the division up to 20% of its operational strength. Several others are nearly as badly off, and that leads to remarkable actions. On the 21st, the 4th Panzer Division cuts off over 10,000 Soviet soldiers near Cherikov and takes 2,000 prisoners. After that, they let the others return to the Soviet lines. Really, this is written in the division's diary, that they have no air support or artillery support, and when they consider how much personnel and equipment they will lose fighting the Soviets to oppose the rest of their breakout, they figure it's not worth it. No longer did the Panzer divisions reign supreme on the battlefield with superior firepower and mobility. Clashes were increasingly being fought on far more equal terms, with the Red Army even able to dominate in some sectors. The inability of Army Group Center to cut down the constant pressure from the east led to a form of strategic deadlock, with forces pinned down all along the front and incapable of supporting each other or being assembled in enough mass to close the troublesome opening in the pocket around Smolensk. It is true that Adolf Strauss's 9th and Maximilian von Weich's 2nd armies are now finally arriving at the western parts of the pocket, but on the 24th, Weich tells Army Group Commander Fedor von Bock that if they move further east, they may have to give up Bobruisk. On the evening of the 19th, the 10th Panzer Division took the heights of Yelnya, but ran out of fuel and almost ran out of ammunition. The Panzer spearheads had reached the logistical limit of their initial advance. That day, the 19th Panzer Division takes Veliki Luki, but the Soviet counterattack, the 20th, breaks the German lines in several places, and they withdraw. The inability to close the Smolensk pocket is also made worse by a Soviet offensive beginning the 23rd. The Soviet 20th, 19th, and 16th armies are fighting for survival in the pocket, but Stavka decides the time has come for a major counterattack. So on the 23rd, the newly deployed 24th, 28th, 29th, and 30th armies attack east of Smolensk from Belyi down to Roslavel. This is orchestrated by Red Army Chief of Staff Georgy Zhukov. The goal is to make concentric attacks on Army Group Center and penetrate and surround its defenses, relieve the three armies, and recapture Smolensk. It has big problems with coordination and logistics, but still, the offensive developed as a kind of crude blunt instrument, hammering away at the German front, gaining little ground, but inflicting fearsome casualties on both sides. At Smolensk, for the first time in the war, Army Group Center's panzer and motorized divisions had to conduct and organize defense, a task for which they were neither structured nor accustomed. But already from the 18th to the 23rd, Konstantin Rokossovsky, with a big mixed bag of units and stragglers that he's put together around the 38th Rifle Division and some 40 tanks of the 101 Tank Division, holds off the German panzers' advance at the Volp River and joins the Soviet offensive the 24th. The Soviet Western Front is now split in two, with Semyon Timoshenko opposite Smolensk and Yelnya, and Vasily Kuznetsov taking the 13th and 21st Armies to protect the front's left flank and prevent the Germans from heading south towards Gomel and Kiev. And far, far to the west, on the 23rd, the Soviet garrison at Brest-Litovsk, who have held out against the Germans for 30 days, finally surrender after the Germans bombard them with Karl. Yeah, Karl. It's their new mortar with shells that weigh over 2 tons each. But the Soviets will have new supplies as well. On the 20th, the first British ship to head for Archangel with supplies, a mine layer, crosses the North Sea. There's plenty of stuff going on at sea this week, actually. On the 23rd, 2 aircraft carriers, 2 cruisers, and 6 destroyers leave Scapa Flow to carry out attacks on German ships carrying stuff from Kirkenes to Petsamo. This is at Joseph Stalin's request. Operation Substance takes place the 21st to the 27th, next week, to supply Malta. 7 transports are sent in, escorted by Force H from Gibraltar, which has been reinforced. So it's not only the Renown, the Ark Royal, a cruiser, and 8 destroyers. Home Fleet has sent the Nelson, 3 more cruisers, and 9 more destroyers. The 23rd, the Italians sink a destroyer and wound a cruiser and 3 destroyers. 1 transport is damaged the 24th, but that's it. As for German shipping, on the 25th, Scharnhorst is at port at La Palisse. 15 Halifax bombers arrive and the ship takes 5 hits. It will be out of action for several months. The Prince Eugen was hit earlier in the month, and Gneisenau is undergoing repairs. So there are now none of the German heavy ships operating out of Brest in actual service. And that brings me to the end of the 100th week of the war. With Japan beginning to head south, and the Germans planning to head both north and south, even as the Soviets are attacking them in the center. Oh, and on the 19th, the V for Victory sign is unofficially adopted as the Allies' signal. This is from a midnight BBC broadcast by Colonel Britain, urging the creation of resistance forces. After this, resistance members paint V signs on walls and German posters and things, and it becomes the symbol. So Hitler wants to go one direction. But we've seen that much of his command wants to go another direction. There has been a fair amount of infighting, and it might well have consequences. Here's what David Stahel has to say about it. While Germany's leading generals fought among themselves and against Hitler's headquarters for direction of the Eastern Campaign, the infighting was, if anything, even more intense among Germany's political institutions, headed by some of the most unscrupulous personalities within the Third Reich, most notable Hermann Goering and Heinrich Himmler. With the toppling of the Soviet state predicted from all quarters, each man vied for the largest slice of the lucrative Soviet prize, seeking to build on their respective empires which made up the internal authorities of the Nazi state. Propaganda Minister Josef Goebbels writes in his diary his observations of this. Always the same. Spheres of authority. And then this. If we go down, then it will be as a result of these disputes. If you'd like to break the timeline and see some more of Southeast Asia, we did a 5-part series on the Indonesian War of Independence over on our Time Ghost channel. You can click here for part 1. Our Time Ghost Army member of the week is Rob Snelders. People like Rob are making sure that our horses are well fed and watered, and the episodes are getting better and better and longer, you might have noticed. So join us at patreon.com or timeghost.tv. And also join Duncan, Hans, and Stanislaus, who are taking an eclair down the Dnieper River, and me, next time and every time. See you soon.